Fast forward 4 years, and it turns out I've got a stomach ulcer. Not ideal. Anyways, last summer I had to spend a night in hospital running some tests on it. And the main hospital isn't in my town, so my boyfriend offered to drive me up. We got there quite late, probably around 9 p.m. When I arrived, the nurse mentioned my boyfriend couldn't stay. I didn't like the idea of staying alone, mainly because I hate hospitals. So he offered to stay until they kicked him out. We fell asleep and got woken up about 6 a.m. by one of the nurses, explaining that they'd forgotten to ask my partner to leave, and even though she didn't mind, the head nurse would be on her way shortly to do her morning rounds, and I shouldn't have had a visitor in my room. So my boyfriend offered to go down to the car for a few hours to sleep more, and once they'd finished the tests, they'd let me go. Anyways, this is where it got weird. About 5 minutes into him leaving, this random guy walks into my room and sits down, telling me the nurses asked him to come in here. I know it sounds stupid, but I guess I was in shock for a few minutes because I sort of believed him. Then I started probing him, and his answer was the same. He was asked to sit in here. By now my fight or flight kicks in. Well, sort of. And I ran into the bathroom with my phone. Don't ask why I didn't run into the corridor again. I clearly don't cope well in these situations. So I get into the bathroom and call my boyfriend, who is crazy protective of me, and tell him what's happened. He immediately makes his way back from the car. At this point, from the bathroom I can hear the guy shouting, "What's this young girl's name? What age is she?" I don't know who he's shouting to because no one is answering him. Thankfully, I can hear my boyfriend coming back into the room and asking the guy who he was. This must have startled him because he ran off down the hall. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed my boyfriend had a horrified look on his face. What I should have also mentioned is that I wear contacts, but had taken them out before falling asleep. So between not having full sight and in my panic, I'd missed that the man's hands, feet, and/or clothes had blood on them, because he'd left a trail of blood across the floor, across the wall, and onto the chair he was sat on. At this point I went down the hall to the nurse's station, still a little in shock, and explained what happened. Right away someone came up to clean the mess, but again, they asked my boyfriend to leave, something he wasn't exactly happy about. The nurses were clearly trying to keep me calm as they tried to make light of it, but I knew something wasn't right. And at this stage, I've realized the guy is actually keeping a close eye in my room because no sooner had my boyfriend left, the man walked back in, closed the door, and began walking towards me, sitting on the bed. Thankfully, the nurse was present this time and demanded the man leave. I don't think they'd taken me too seriously until now, but finally, they noticed that having a blooded man continuously trying to break into my room was shaking me, and they told me it was safer to have my boyfriend with me, as he must have been the guy's biggest deterrent. Rightly so, because for the rest of the morning, the guy kept walking past my room trying to peer through to see if my partner was still there. He eventually gave up, or was sent somewhere else. I finished my test and was allowed home. The nurses tried to tell me the guy had a head injury, which was the reason he was in the hospital. But they were obviously worried enough for my safety to let my boyfriend stay in the room. Anyways, what worries me the most is that the guy was definitely watching my room, because every time my boyfriend left, he came in right away. It doesn't bear thinking about what would have happened if the nurses had kicked him out in the middle of the night. So, random bloody guy in the hospital, I don't know what you wanted, but let's not meet. I should preface this story by saying that this happened in a very rural town in Northern California, mostly a retirement community, but there are also a fair amount of tweakers, though I doubt that the man in this story was one. Most of the population is rednecks, and many of them hunt, fish, off-road, etc. The town is also backwoods, and I mean that literally. If you were to walk off many of the streets near where this happened, you could go into some really deep forest. I tell you this because I want you to understand how easily someone could go missing, or someone could hide a body. Now on to the actual story. I was about 18 or 19 at the time, and living with my best friend. A few of our friends lived close by, about 2 miles away, and we decided to walk to go hang out at their house. It was late at night, probably somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. We knew our friends would still be awake because they usually stayed up really late, and it was a weekend. It had to have been summer or fall at night because I remember it being warm, and neither my friend or I wearing jackets. As I said, it is a very rural town, and there aren't really any streetlights, so the only light was our flashlights. The only way to our destination was through the back roads, which he and I have walked numerous times. But this time, we decided to take a different way, as I wanted to see if this way was any shorter. This led to the most frightening experience of my life. We were most of the way to our friend's house, taking a long and curved road with mostly nicer houses on it. Most of the houses between our house and our friend's house were groups of nice houses or groups of crappy mobile homes. My friend was about 3 feet in front of me as we walked. We had been talking, and at this point, there was a break in the conversation. It was pretty dark that night, but not pitch black. For some reason I can't recall, perhaps instinct, or maybe just luck, I decided to turn around. What I saw behind me shocked and terrified me to my core. And as I write this, I feel cold and my eyes are watering. As I turned around, I saw a man standing about 15 or 20 feet behind me. That alone would be a little scary, as it was late at night. However, what this man was wearing is what truly scares me. The man standing behind me was wearing full body camouflage and night vision goggles. He was clad in a camel hoodie shirt of some kind, a big belt that almost looked like Batman's utility belt or something, camel pants with knee pads, boots, and either black or brown gloves. The night vision goggles were what creeped me out the most though. They weren't exactly glowing green like in the movies and video games, but I could see the green of them. He was not thin or fat, and might have been muscular under the costume, but I could not tell. I have been fairly tall my whole life, I am 6'3", and this man was clearly taller than me by at least a few inches. I processed this all very quickly, as adrenaline had kicked in at this point. I turned around fairly quickly, as I did not want this man to know that I had seen him. Now, as I said, I am fairly tall, though I am also quite skinny. However, my friend that was in front of me was about as tall as me, but much stockier. He is not someone that you would want to fight, even though he has no martial arts training, and isn't that fit. I thought that I did not want a confrontation with this camouflage man, though, because he was clearly prepared for something. I'm not sure how long he had been following us, but I'm sure I had not heard him sneak upon us. The gear he had on was clearly expensive, and I hoped that he had bought what he was wearing for hunting, and not for whatever the fuck he was doing now. If he had just been some random tweaker or something, I would have just warned my friend and ran. But I think that this man would have caught at least me. I have no idea why this man was following us. If it was to fuck with us. But I think it was something more sinister. If he had not been dressed in the gear, I would have assumed he was just some paranoid guy that didn't trust teenagers walking by his house. But he had to have been wearing the outfit and then decided to follow us. Being that he had the suit and the belt, I assumed that he must have some sort of weapon of some kind. Though it was dark, so I didn't actually see him with one. I leaned over slightly and whispered into my friend's ear, "Do you see that guy behind us?" He whispered back, "Yeah," I replied. "Walk faster." Because we were halfway around the bend of the road, and after that bend was about a quarter of a mile of straight road to our friend's street. Thankfully, my friend complied, and we walked at a quicker pace. I recently talked to my friend about this incident, and he says that he had also seen him but didn't want to say anything in case the guy heard. I decided to chance a quick look back at the man, but made it look like I was just looking around everywhere. And I looked everywhere around me. He was still following us, but I didn't look long enough to see if he had picked up the pace. He had to have, though, because he was the same distance as he was before, if not closer. We finally made it to where the street turned to the straight road. And it also has a lot more traffic, but I doubted that a car would drive by this late. As soon as we got to the straight road, I told my friend to run, and we both took off at full speed and ran all the way to our friend's house. We practically fall over each other getting inside. And then we quickly turned and locked the door. I frantically told my friends what had happened, and they tried to calm me down. I wanted to call the police, but one of them told me that the cops in this town were shitty and probably wouldn't do anything because the man hadn't actually done anything to us. And I wasn't sure which house he had come out of. I agreed with him even though I didn't really like this guy, and he was just a friend of my friend's. At the time, not calling the police made sense to me, but thinking back on it, he probably didn't want cops around because he was 20 and his girlfriend was like 16. Part of why I didn't like him. I stayed up for a few hours at the house, being paranoid and hoping that no one would knock at the door or anything. Dawn came, and I finally fell asleep for a while. We called my best friend's mom and she drove us back to his house. And once we go back to our house, I didn't want to alarm her as she was very protective and fairly sensitive. I never walked back to that house that late again, and certainly never walked by those houses again. After that incident, I carried a pocket knife with me when I walked places, even in the day. I moved a few months later, and thankfully never saw that man again. I've checked missing persons for any in that area, and there haven't been any reported, so I don't really regret not filing a report. This incident happened years ago, but I figured this was the right place to share since the memory of it resurfaced recently. To give a clearer picture, I live in one of the quieter areas in the country, so when night falls, it can get pretty deserted except for the occasional car driving by. To allow ease of access since transport is difficult in my living area, there are a few clusters of stores in the neighborhood that's just 10 to 15 minutes away from my apartment. Small eating places, markets, convenience stores, clinics, etc. I generally do not have the habit of leaving my home at night, but on that particular night, an old friend of mine was staying over and wanted to get a bite to eat. She gets crazy blood sugar level problems when she doesn't eat within a certain time frame. So the both of us agreed that it would be much safer if we visited the 24-hour food place, just right across the opposite street, during daybreak instead. It went fine in the beginning, since it's progressively getting brighter and easier to see. We chose to sit in one of the resting spots, so my friend can finish hers, since she was already feeling lightheaded. Being someone with a nervous disposition and symptoms of paranoia, it's only natural that throughout it all I was really on edge. The presence of my friend did great to ease off some of the nerves, but it doubled when we noticed someone shuffling towards us. It isn't any surprise to occasionally see people around the city in the early hours, on account that there are 24-hour stores nearby. But the fact that the man was staring straight at us the whole duration of the time he took to walk to the open court has me spooked already. It was a straight-up stare. He didn't look away at all, and there was a smile on his face, but his gaze just bored right through you. He wasn't carrying anything, so he couldn't have been shopping. And he chose a seat near our table despite the fact that there were so many empty spaces around. At that point in time, I was already plenty nervous and wanted to leave. But being the fearless and sometimes occasionally infuriating friend that she is, my friend did not appear to share my sentiments. That was when the question started. The man began asking us questions that grew from harmless to probing. He wanted to know how old we are, where we're from, where we lived, if we wanted to come walk around with him. He also offered a lot of compliments, telling us how smooth our hairs were, how pretty we looked, how we had long legs and nice-looking waists, etc. Even my friend telling him plainly to fuck off and leave us alone doesn't help. She was flat out insulting him in the harshest way possible, while I froze up from an internal panic. I understood in that very moment that we were in a dangerous situation. The slimeball has the cheek to wheedle and complain that he just wanted to be friends with you girls. That we shouldn't be bitchy to him because he just wanted to give us a good time. It took me a while because I tend to shut down in confrontational situations. But the whole exchange was making me sicker and sicker, I was shaking, my hands freezing, with nerves and wanting to puke. But I managed to stand and drag my friend away to the closest convenience store to hide as quickly as I can. From young, my parents have always stressed that it's important to get yourself into a safer public place and call for help if you think you're in danger, so that was an instinct. I'll admit I was at a loss of what to do. I just knew we needed to get away and we needed to get to someplace safe. The convenience store was the closest, and even while we were speed walking away, we could still hear the man hollering at us not to leave, that he was just lonely and needed company. We stayed inside for a good long while before we decided to head back to my home. And if my bowels were any weaker, I would have shit myself when my friend mumbles to me that she sees the same man shadowing us. For someone who has irrational worries about being followed home, murdered and worse all the time, even when unprovoked, that was a literal nightmare. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I felt like I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. And I eventually did scream when we still couldn't shake him off, after doing loops around the places that were still open. I don't remember what I said, and I don't remember much after that. I don't really know why, but I think I shut down or something like that. But the gist of what happened, based on my friend's account, was that I started crying and screaming for the man to leave us alone repeatedly. She couldn't make out what I was saying, because I was hysterical, but she said I was loud enough to send the convenience store staff and a few of the vendors manning the 24-hour food places running over, and that the man fled when they did. Unfortunately, the man was never caught. I shudder to think what would have happened if he followed us all the way back to my home.